back. Please be seated. And Mr. Griffith, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Hey, Ms. Wilkerson, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I have some questions to clarify some issues that I've got. If you'll help me through it, I'd appreciate it. Now, you originally used one software program and then changed to is it Strymix?
STR mix is how we say it.
STR Mix?
Yes.
Now, what was the difference between it and the, was it Globofiller?
Globofiler is the amplification, the new amplification kit that has 21 markers. The previous statistic program was called PopStats. And the difference is it uses a different type of program it utilizes more information. So the old way, you literally just put in the numbers and it took the frequencies for each of the markers and put it in an equation and gave you the end result. Then the new way, it actually takes into account other aspects of the DNA process. It can take into account amplification efficiency because some markers amplify better than other markers. It takes into account the something called dropout. If you have a low-level DNA profile, then certain peaks may drop out and you don't see them. It'll account for that where the old software didn't.
Okay, in the old software, you used 50 markers, and now you're down to 21 markers. Is that correct?
No, 15 originally.
Oh, 15.
Went up
I'm
to
sorry,
21.
I thought you said 50. I apologize.
Sorry.
Okay, now, you still have to designate the number of DNA, of donors to the DNA. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you determine how many donors, not the software.
Correct.
And you input that information into the software program.
Yes.
Okay. And if you don't, do you get different results depending on how many donors you put in?
It can be different.
And the reason I ask you that, on some of the results, I think you said you used 2 donors, other times you said you used 3.
Yes.
Why do you switch around like that?
I used the 2 because the profile itself looked like 2. There was no indication of a third person if you just look at the data. But then when I actually compare, because I do a manual comparison as well and don't depend totally on the software, I would look at each person, Voncile, Richard, John, Donald, and they look like they should be there. And in a lot of cases, it was stuff from their house. You would expect at least Voncile, John, or Richard, one of them, to be there. So, but they were all being excluded. So when I did that, I realized that the number of contributors may be incorrect. Even though the profile looks like 2, it might be 3 because they're related. And the sharing is making it throw the number off. So that's why I ran it again as 3.
So in other words, if you didn't get the results you wanted, you went to manual.
I always manually compare before I use the software.
Okay. So the software can give you a different result than your manual.
It is possible.
So which one do we believe?
Well, I can't tell the software that they're related. That's not an option I can put in there. So the software is seeing the profile without the knowledge that they're related. So it's more likely that there's 3 people or more in these mixtures that are like the one where I assume 2 and then assume 3. It's more likely that 3 is correct because the software doesn't know that they're related.
Wait a minute. On this new, the STR Mix, the new program, you can't tell that program that you have related DNA?
No, there's not like a box where I can put in that all these people are related to each other.
How about on your old software that you used? Were you able to put in that they were related in that?
No.
Okay. So you can never tell the software that the DNA samplings are related?
There is a way to figure out a related statistic, meaning just the frequencies. They change the end result number, but not that I'm aware of that you can enter that it's related. But you can use a related statistic on the inside, or the end of the program when it gives a result. But FDLE has not performance checked or validated that, and I don't have that option.
So you can't put in there that they're related, is what you're
Correct.
telling me. Although you can do it, you're not doing it with FDLE.
Yes, FDLE does not have a procedure for it.
And when you say they don't have a procedure, are they saying that the software is defective or that they're just not using that procedure?
They're just not using that part of the software that will give a related statistic.
Why?
It gives, the reason I was given was because it would involve too many variables that were too hard to determine. Like you had to enter the number of children, average children per household, and things such as that, and there wasn't really good data to determine that.
So that part of the program, FDLE has determined part of the program is defective or not useful.
I'm unfamiliar with that part of the program. I was never trained on it, so I would not say it's defective or not useful. I'm just saying we don't use it.
So you're not using full, all of the available programming that the program gives you, you're not using it.
Yes, the program does things that we don't use.
And you don't know what the results would be if you used all the available soft variables in that program.
I do not.
And that could change it through
It
your
could
results.
change the number, yes.
And that's significant, is it not?
Well, it's unlikely that it would change them from included to excluded, but the statistic might not be as high. Like the greater than 700 billion may go down, or the 1.9 million may go down.
Or the 10,000 or 100,000 may go down.
Yes,
So in other words, it would change your results.
yes, the number.
And you don't know if it would change anything else on the inclusion or exclusion, because you just don't know.
I haven't run it, so yes, I don't know.
Okay, let me refer you to the Exhibit 22A, the hammer we're talking about. Do you have that?
Yes,
Okay. When I read your report, you said that you were swabbing the black handle of the hammer. And on your report, you included 4 different people into that sample, but then you said it was 3 people. Is that right? Or am I misunderstanding?
no, I again put a mixture of 3 into the STR mix program because the profile looks like 3. But again, I can't tell them they're related. So that's probably why the 4 people are included. But the program works because I compare each person individually. So I put the mixture profile in the program, and then I would put like Voncile's profile in the program, and they would run against each other. And it tells me how likely it is that she's included into that mixture. Then, separate run all together, I put the mixture in again, then I run John, and then I run Richard, so on, separately. So it's never, I'm not saying that 3 certain people are in that profile. I'm saying that each individual person could be included into that profile, and I give the number on how likely that is.
Well, you included 4 people in that sample,
Yes,
but your results said it was 3 people.
but like I said, all 4 could be included. I'm not telling you that it's 3 of those 4 specifically. I can't deconvolute the mixture down to say that it's definitely these 3 people. It just looks at the overall profile and then compares it to the known. So all 4 of those people could be included into the mixture, and especially because they're related, there may really be 4 people in the mixture. But STR mix doesn't see it that way. It sees it as 3 people.
But you're reporting 3 people, but it could be 4 people is what you're telling me.
In the case of related individuals, yes, it could be 4 individuals.
Because your calculation was for unrelated individuals, but since they're related, it can give you a different result.
The unrelated actually refers to the database that's used. The database, they collected a number of samples from random individuals, and they ran their DNA profiles. So then they counted the number of times they saw each allele type. So, like, well, we saw, 10 11s here and 5 12s there, and they came up with a frequency for the different DNA alleles at all the different markers. And those people that they used for the sampling were unrelated. So the N number that it spits out is for unrelated people.
But there's a difference between unrelated and related.
And yes, with DNA.
And are you saying that this new software, the STR mix, does not do a calculation for related individuals?
I cannot do it at FDLE. We do not have a procedure, and it has not been validated.
But it does do it.
It does have a related likelihood ratio, that number that it could give as an end result. The software itself has the ability. I don't have the ability.
And obviously, when they made or developed the software, they thought it was important to have that in the software. They wouldn't have included it. You just don't use that part of the program.
Correct.
When you do these calculations, I'm talking about this black handle, you don't put Voncile, Richard, John, and Donald into the same calculation, correct?
Correct.
Although you don't do that when you quote your sample, you're including them all. Is that right?
They're all included as a possible contributor to that mixture.
Even though you don't put them in together.
Yes.
There were numerous items that you talked about that tested positive for blood.
Yes.
Was that human blood or was that just blood?
The test is not specific to human. It could be animal blood.
So, other than the few items that you ran specifically to see whose blood it was, a lot of the items you were talking about that were positive for blood, you don't know if it was human blood or not.
No.
And you have a method of checking that, do you not?
We do have a test that will tell you if it is human or ferret blood.
What about animal blood?
It should exclude all other animals except ferret.
But you don't know if it did.
Typically, that's not a procedure unless it's needed for that particular case. I test it for blood. If I run a DNA and I get a DNA profile, it's likely it was human because the animal would not work for the DNA.
But we just don't know for sure.
The ones where full DNA profiles.
When you did the full, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, ma'am. When you did the full DNA profile, like you said on a couple items, it was Voncile Smith's blood.
Yes,
Then
that's probably.
we know that's Voncile Smith's blood.
Yes.
But there were a lot of other items where you said there was blood that we don't know.
Yes, if I didn't run DNA on it, I couldn't have any clue whether it was animal or human.
Okay. Now, sometimes I realize when I get up here, I don't take the best notes. I'm going to jump around a little bit if you don't mind. Now, what is CODIS?
Sorry, COATS?
CODIS, C-O-D-I-S.
Oh, CODIS. It's the Combined DNA Index System. It's the database that's maintained by the FBI that convicted offenders go into, unknown crime samples, or unknown samples from crime scenes. Missing people go in there, subjects are entered. They hold things like that, and it compares them to each other in order to try to identify suspects for crimes, or identify, if they find unidentified human remains, it may hit them with a missing person, and then we'll know who they are, such as that.
Okay. In this case, there were several unknown DNA samples.
There was only one complete profile. There are some unknown peaks in some of these mixtures.
Did you compare any of these with CODIS?
The unknowns? No, I did not.
You could have.
One of the profiles, it actually came off of a letter that was sent to Richard Smith at his office. I did not enter. I got a full male profile that's unidentified. I did not enter it into CODIS because I couldn't link it to the crime. One of the FBI's rules is that it has to be associated with the crime at hand, so it was not entered. All the rest of the unknown peaks weren't enough to enter into CODIS.
How about the unknown DNA from Richard Smith's front pants pocket?
There wasn't enough foreign DNA that didn't match the family that I could enter it.
Do you have any idea where that foreign DNA in his front pants pocket came from?
I could make some educated guesses, but I wouldn't know for certain.
Okay. So that's what we don't know, where it came
Yes.
from. Is that correct? Now, you talked about DNA. What is skin cell DNA?
Skin cell are your epithelial cells. That's just from your whole body, your skin, your hands, everything you touch, like your clothes being on your shoulders and back right now. There would be transfer potentially from skin DNA onto your clothes.
For instance, on the jury seats, on this platform, the bar here, or on this, you can get DNA just by putting your bare skin on that surface. Is that right?
It's possible to get DNA from that.
And with DNA, you cannot tell how long it's been there. Am I correct?
I cannot.
So DNA can be somewhere for a few minutes, or it can be there for several years.
Yes, it can be.
In fact, I think there are situations where we found DNA 10, 15 years old that have been used. Is that correct?
Yes.
So although with all this testing you do, you can certainly say if my client's DNA, Voncile Smith's DNA, my DNA, anybody's DNA is on an object or on in a place, you have no way of determining how long that DNA has been there.
Correct.
Now, you indicated that you went to the crime scene on the 31st day of July to run the Faro machine.
Yes.
That's the video machine that gives a 360 view of each room. Am I correct on that?
Pretty close, yes.
In layman's terms.
Yes.
So basically what you're doing is you're running a fancy camera to get measurements and a picture of the room.
Yes.
Did you, at any time while you were at the crime scene, do anything else, collect any evidence, look for any evidence, anything such as that?
I did not search or collect any evidence. I just ran the Faro, and I did create a sketch showing where the Faro scans were in the house.
When you say you create the sketch, does the Faro do the sketch, or do you actually do the sketch?
No, I created it. I used a Microsoft Visio program, and I just put little squares and circles into it to show where they are.
So it's software programming?
Yes.
It's not like you're taking my legal pad and drawing it like that. You're using a software program.
I draw it like that at the crime scene because I don't have the computer with me, and then I go back to the office and do it nicer on a computer.
Well, then what's the Faro machine do?
It actually, it takes all the measurements and pictures and overlays them. So when you put that into the software program, a different software program, the Faro software, you can actually move around in the crime scene and look at the different angles, and you can take measurements within the program.
So it's not something that you're sketching out at that point?
No, I can't do anything within that like that.
What did you mean by the extraction and amplification of DNA?
The extraction is when you break open the cells and let the DNA out. Amplification is when you make copies of the areas of the DNA that you're interested in.
So you're taking these skin cells and you're extracting from them and then amplifying what you've extracted?
Yes.
And this is all done by, is it all done by computers, or how's it done?
No, the extraction is usually more manual, like I add the chemicals into the tubes. We do now have a robotic extraction system, but I believe this case was before that. And then it's put on a robotic system that sets up the quantitation and the amplification and the plate for the genetic analyzer.
And that's all done computer-wise?
A person still has to move things around and put like plates on there, put the chemicals on there. It just moves liquid is all it does. It moves the liquid to the correct place.
Mr. Myers asked you about, is DNA fragile and does it degrade? Well, actually, it'll stay for long, long periods of time.
It depends on the conditions.
Right. Like we talked about, it could be 10 years more or more.
Yes, in the right conditions, it could stay there that long.
And when you talked about it degrades with each transfer, you mean the sample is smaller?
Yes, less amount would transfer.
But the DNA itself is not degrading, it's just the amount of transfer degrades or gets smaller.
Yes.
Okay. On the iPhone, you never found Mr. Hartung's DNA on that iPhone, did you?
No, he was excluded.
How about the BlackBerry?
He was excluded from that as well.
Okay. Now, on the hammer, and there are a couple things I didn't understand with the hammer. There is a black rubber handle part, right?
Yes.
Then you have the yellow shaft,
Yes.
and then you have the metal head of the hammer.
Yes.
So those were the three different areas you checked.
I did that, plus I stuck a piece of paper in the crack between the head and the shaft.
And did you find anything when you did that?
I did get results.
What results did you get?
I developed a mixture of at least two. The complete major DNA profile was determined that matched John. The minor was insufficient for inclusion but suitable for exclusion. Voncile and Richard could not be included or excluded. Donald Hartung was excluded.
He was excluded from that part between the head of the hammer and the yellow shaft.
Yes.
Okay. What did you get blood out of that?
I didn't actually check it. I just stuck the paper up in there and cut it and put it in a tube.
So you don't know if there was blood there or not?
No.
As far as the head of the hammer, the metal part,
Yes.
did you get blood off of that?
That gave chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And whose blood was that?
Most likely it would be John Smith's because he was the complete major on the head.
Well, wait a minute. We can't go with most likely. Was it his or wasn't it his?
There's DNA there that matches John Smith, but whether the blood provided that DNA or they came from some other means like spit or something, I can't tell you for certain.
Or handling it?
Yes, we're handling it.
I mean, if you grab a hammer and you hold it by the head, your DNA would be on it, right?
Possibly, yes.
And you can't say whether that blood was John Smith's or not.
Not for certain, no.
Okay. Did you find blood anywhere else on the hammer?
The yellow shaft gave chemical indications for the presence of blood, and so did the handle.
And whose blood?
The shaft and the handle did not give a clear major. Typically, blood would transfer DNA better than touch, which is why I said that about the head, but I would have no idea.
In other words, you can't say beyond any reasonable doubt that that hammer contained the blood of Voncile Smith, Richard Smith, or John Smith.
Well, there is blood and they're included, so it's likely one of them, but I can't tell you which one.
But you can't say.
No, I can't.
Okay, so you can't tell us whose blood it is.
No, I can't.
And you can't tell us if the DNA you got from that hammer is from the blood or from somewhere else.
Not for certain, no.
Okay, well, that's what I asked you. So you don't know if that blood on that hammer is from any of the Smiths?
Correct.
Now, that hammer had, in different parts of the hammer, well, okay, on the head, whose DNA is on the head, the hard, the metal part?
The major is John, matches John.
And Donald's excluded from that.
Yes.
On the yellow shaft, whose DNA is on the yellow shaft?
Richard and John were included as possible contributors, and Voncile and Donald were in the inconclusive zone. So
Which means you don't know.
Yeah, it's a fancy way to say you don't know.
So when you're talking about stuff being inconclusive, that means you just don't know, right?
Yes, that's why we have that zone.
Okay, so you don't know. So let's go to the rubber handle of the hammer. On that rubber handle, whose DNA is on that?
Voncile, Richard, John, and Donald were all included as possible contributors.
That's not a certainty, that's a possibility.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't have any certainty that Donald Hartung's DNA is on that hammer?
No, I just give the weight for the match. This is
But you don't have any certainty?
no.
And you can't tell me that beyond a reasonable doubt Donald Hartung's DNA is on the hammer?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Now, and you found under the fingernails of all three people, you didn't find any foreign DNA.
Correct.
Were you ever given the drains of the kitchen sink to check for any type of blood?
No.
You said you got crime scene Sergeant Bjornson's DNA off the silver screw on the kitchen sink.
He couldn't be excluded from the mixture, so it's possible his DNA was there.
Okay, and that's the kitchen sink handle, correct? That we're
Yeah,
talking about. Now, when I said kitchen sink, I'm sorry, I meant kitchen sink handle.
Yes, the handle.
Okay, and you got some of Voncile Smith's blood on that handle, I understand?
Yes, the blood matched Voncile.
Donald was not anywhere else. Hartung wasn't anywhere on the handle.
He was excluded. No, I did not get his DNA on anything on the handle.
On the Swiss Army case. I don't want to break your machine. Is that the button? Oh, thanks. And then, okay, thank you. Thank you, Judge. Is this a Swiss Army case?
Yes, looks like it.
Okay, that states Exhibit 259. Is the area above the white 5-inch marker, is that where you found blood?
I believe so. I said it was on the back corner. That looks
And-
like a back corner.
Whose blood is that?
The profile matched Richard. It was a complete profile.
Okay. Did you find Donald's DNA on the outside of that case?
The original comparison, he could not be included or excluded from the outside of the case. And then he was included as a possible contributor when I reworked it.
When you reworked it, you said he was a possible contributor, which means you don't know if he's a contributor or not.
That's, for mixtures, that's how I report out. It's included
just
as a
don't
possible
know.
mixture. Yes.
Okay. Right here, on that big case, on that big case, was Donald Hartung's DNA on the outside of that case?
The swabbing of the outside of that case, that's the same case. It would be the same results, although I did match Donald to the foreign on the zippers from the case.
Okay, okay, that's what I was gonna ask you. There's a zipper here, and then there's a zipper that goes over the top here.
Yes.
Which zipper are you talking about?
I swabbed both of them on the same swab.
Okay, and was Mr. Hartung's DNA on this zipper, or was it on this zipper?
I don't know. It was on either one of them or both.
Well, was it on one or two, or you just don't know which one it was on?
It was either on either one of them or both. I don't know which one if it was one.
So the answer is you know that there's a zipper on that case, and you're sure that Mr. Hartung's DNA is on a zipper, but you don't know which zipper, or you don't know if it's both zippers.
No, they were pretty close to each other in relation. I had no issue swabbing them on the same swab.
Well, wait, run that by me again.
Well, typically we swab different areas, but they're physically close to each other.
What, the zippers? There's one that opens the whole case up and one that opens a pouch up. Now, did you take a swab, a single swab from both that zipper and that zipper? Or did
Just-
you take two separate?
Grab to close the zippers.
Okay, so it's not the zipper, you're talking about these little pieces here?
Yes.
Okay. So it's, well, let's call it the zipper handle.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got two zipper handles, a zipper handle here and a zipper handle here. Which of those two zipper handles do you have Mr. Hartung's DNA on?
I don't know. Could be both. It could be one or the other.
The answer, you don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Now, you, continuing on this piece of, or this exhibit, which is 316, there was an envelope you checked for DNA. And you said Mr. Hartung's DNA was not on that envelope, am I correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Was it that envelope, do you know?
I believe I swabbed all of them onto the same swab.
Okay, you swabbed all these envelopes with one swab,
Yes.
and when you swabbed all the envelopes with one swab, did Mr. Hartung's DNA come back on any of them?
No.
How about this little green thing here?
The Kleenex package.
Oh, that's a Kleenex package?
Yes.
I guess my reading's not so good. Was Mr. Hartung's DNA on that?
No, he was excluded.
How about this down here? Did you swab those?
I don't remember swabbing those.
Okay.
Mine's in mail, but it's possible if it came in with the mail. Yeah, I can check. I labeled it as cards and papers, so it's possible that that was included with the swab of the mail.
Which means you didn't get Mr. Hartung's DNA on any of this stuff down here.
The papers, no. The checkbook's different.
Okay, now we'll get to the checkbook. On this checkbook, how many different swabs did you take on the checkbook?
I took the swabbing from the outside of the checkbook.
That would be the outside of the cover,
the
right?
case, yes. Mhm.
Okay, and did you get Mr. Hartung's DNA on that?
Yes, he was matched the complete form.
On the outside of the checkbook.
Yes.
On the inside of the checkbook, you also took DNA swabs, correct?
I swabbed the top check.
Okay, and was my client's DNA on the top check?
No, he was excluded.
Okay, so on this total exhibit, you have Mr. Hartung's DNA on the outside of the checkbook, is that correct?
Yes.
And either on this zipper handle or this zipper handle or both, but you don't know.
Yes.
Do you know how long Mr. Hartung's DNA had been on the outside of the checkbook?
I don't know.
Do you know how long his DNA was either on that zipper handle or that zipper handle?
No, I don't know.
On this case, on all over this case, the outside, you checked all that too, did you not, for DNA?
I swabbed
The red part and the black part here?
Yeah, I swabbed the outside of the case trying to avoid anything that looked like blood.
Okay, and whose DNA was all over that?
Voncile and Donald were included as possible contributors.
Possible, but not definite.
I never do a definite for
Okay.
a mixture.
Now, on this purse, the exterior of the purse, any DNA on the exterior, this is Exhibit 202.
I did different swabs from the exterior. I did a swabbing of the handle, swabbing of the snap and latch, and the swabbing of the suspected blood next to the opening.
Okay? And on the exterior of the purse was Donald Hartung's DNA found.
He was included as a possible contributor on the handle, and I matched him to the DNA, the foreign DNA on the snap and latch.
Is that this right here? On that side, or is it on that side, or is it on the outside of that?
I did the whole piece that pulls over and snaps down.
Okay. When you said he's on this strap, right?
He was included as a possible contributor.
Possibly.
Yes.
Okay. Now, but you said you did, is it a definite that you've got his DNA on the snap and latch?
It was a complete DNA profile that
Okay.
matched him.
Okay, now, here is my question. And when you said his complete DNA profile was on the snap and latch, are you talking about the inside here or that right there? Or are you talking about the outside of that tab?
The piece that hangs over that has the snap, I would have swabbed the whole thing.
Okay, so we can't see what you swabbed because of the position of it, is that right?
Here, this would help. I'm talking about right here.
Okay.
The cloth latch that would come over and snap to there, I would have swabbed that whole thing.
Okay, and my question was it on the outside of that or on the inside of that, or do you not recall?
I believe I swabbed both sides, so I
With
don't
the-
know which the DNA was on.
Okay, so you swabbed both sides with the same swab, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. And again, you don't know how long that purse was touched by Mr. Hartung.
I don't know how long the DNA was there.
Do you know, did that have any contents in the purse when you received it?
There was a quarter, a nickel, and a penny.
Okay. Did you swab those for Mr. Hartung's DNA?
I did not.
Did you swab the interior of the purse for Mr. Hartung's DNA?
I took a swab from the inside opening of the purse.
And whose DNA was there?
A complete foreign, oops, I'm sorry, that's the wrong, the brown purse, not the black purse. It was a foreign insufficient for inclusion but suitable for exclusion. Richard, John, and Donald could not be included or excluded.
Okay. So there's foreign DNA in there?
Yes.
We don't know whose it is.
I can't say for certain which person, no.
And on the brown purse, you have nothing of Mr. Hartung.
No, he was excluded from all my swabbings of the brown purse.
I'm going to ask you some other questions, but since I came to that, I might as well ask you about State's Exhibit 384 while we're talking. On 384, look at D21S11, okay?
Okay.
What does that mean?
That's just the name of the area of the DNA that we're talking about.
That doesn't mean anything to me, honestly.
Somebody named them. The 21 actually means the 21st chromosome, and
Okay.
the 11 is just the area location on that chromosome.
Okay, so when you talk about locus, you're not talking about location on the hammer handle. You're just talking about,
It's the location on the
DNA.
DNA, on your DNA strands.
okay. That's what didn't make any sense, why you would number something like that, but that's DNA strands, I understand it. What's this 29 here? What's that match up to?
It doesn't, none of the 4 people there could have provided that 29. It would have to be another person.
Okay, so on the hammer handle, we've got some other person supplying DNA?
Yes, appears so.
Okay, do we know who that person is?
I do not.
Now, number 12, is that some other person supplying DNA?
Yes, it couldn't have come from those 4.
So if it's DNA that couldn't have come from Mr. Hartung or the Smiths, we've got another person providing that DNA on number 12, is that right?
Other than those 4, yes, another person.
Okay, go down to TH01. How about number 7? Does that match any of the 4 people?
No.
Okay. How about on this one, D16S539? Does number 9 match anyone?
No.
Go to D19S433. Does number 12 match anyone?
No.
And if we drop down to FGA on the very bottom, who matches number 23?
None of those 4 do.
Okay. On this is where you reported 3 donors, but you've got 4, is that right?
Well, in the original working, I reported it as at least 3.
Okay, but we had 4.
It's possible there's 4. Yes.
Well, we've got Donald, Voncile, Richard, and John. That's 4, right?
All 4 are included as possible contributors.
Let me turn it off. I'm gonna burn your bulb out. On Exhibit 153, which was that Swiss Army knife case, you talked about being a mixture of DNA on that?
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
How many donors did you use? I didn't see that.
For the rework and STR mix, I assumed 2 and ran it through, and also assumed 3 and ran it through.
Okay. Why didn't you assume 4?
Because when I ran it as 3, I was already getting very low percentages. It basically gives a percentage to each contributor you assign to it. So when I told it there was likely 3 contributors in there, it assigned one person at 86%, one at 13%, and one at 1%. If I went to 4, in all likelihood, it would have given that 4th person a 0 percentage. And I can't report out stuff with 0 percentages.
Wait a minute. We're talking about 4 people, correct?
Yes.
And if it gave 0%, we take it that would be an honest answer from the computer.
Yes, but again, the computer doesn't know they're related.
Okay, we're going to get to that in a minute. But you got 4 potential contributors, and you're trying to see if there are 4 matches. So you just arbitrarily decide to do 3.
Well, I ran 2 because it looks like 2, but knowing that they're related, I tried it as 3, and STR Mix modeled it that yes, there could be a 3rd person, and it gave the statistics for those. But I doubt seriously it would model it as a 4th person, so I didn't try it as 4.
Okay, but if it did, you said it would give a 0, potentially.
I think it might, yes.
And you're not allowed to report a 0. Why aren't you allowed to report what the software program gives you?
Basically, it's telling you that it's wrong. If it's telling you the 4th person is 0%, at least what it's seeing from the profile, it's telling you that it doesn't think the 4th person exists.
So does that mean it's a bad program?
No, just unfortunately, you can't tell them that they're related and they're all likely sharing.
If you put 2 donors in, then everyone is excluded, correct?
Yes.
But when you put 3 donors in, now you're including Mr. Hartung.
Yes.
If you put 4 donors in, would you exclude Mr. Hartung, or do you just not know because you didn't run it?
No, there's a difference between going from 2 people to 3 people than there is from 3 to 4. When you only have 2 people in a mixture, it limits your options. So, for instance, at say a marker, I had an 11, a 12, and a 13, and I made the assumption that Richard is in this one. Just say he's an 11, 12 at that marker. So therefore, the other person, because I'm only telling it there's 2, has to have a 13. It's not giving me any other options. But once I tell the software there's 3 people, it now opens up other options, because Richard's still 11, 12, but now somebody could be an 11, 11, somebody could be an 11, 12, somebody could be a 12, 13, somebody could be an 11, 13, somebody could be a 13, 13. It opens up all these options that 2 people doesn't have. 2 people is very restricting when it comes to mixtures. So once you get to the 3, it included them because the other options opened up. 4 would not open up additional options. You would still have those same options.
So in other words, you can jiggle the results based on what you put into the software program.
Well, obviously going from 2 to 3 can change your results dramatically, but going from 3 to 4 shouldn't, it might change the overall number that's reported out, but it shouldn't change whether they're included or excluded.
But my point is, you can jiggle around the number of contributors to get kind of what you want to see.
I did the number of contributors to what I thought was correct. It looks like 2, so I ran it as 2. But when I got my results, that does not look correct to me. It's not intuitive to what I'm seeing as a person looking at this, knowing that they're related. So then I ran it as 3.
So if you don't like the results and you're just going to do what you want to do, why do you use the program at all?
The program does a lot of mathematical calculations that it would take me years to do.
In other words, it's calculating mathematically stuff you can't calculate mathematically in a reasonable amount of time.
Yes.
Let me run back to the sofa cushion that Mr. Myers asked you about. That was Exhibit 106, if that helps you.
I got it.
Okay. Mr. Hartung was excluded on that, correct?
Correct.
But you had DNA results that you didn't have an answer to, right?
I made the assumption that Voncile, Richard, and John were there. It's their sofa. But there was DNA foreign to them that I don't know who belongs to.
And that was, are they called alleles? Is that am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
You had 16 foreign alleles.
Yes.
And was that not enough to put it into CODIS?
Given their height and the fact that they likely could be mixing with the people that I know are in the mixture, I couldn't decipher out that other person to put it in CODIS.
Well, you couldn't have put the whole thing with the 16 alleles in to see what came back?
You can't put a mixture with that many people into CODIS. It'll hit to too much.
Well, how do you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That was rude. How do you know there were that many other contributors to those 16 alleles, or did you just assume there were?
No, I mean, I can't put the whole mixture in there because I've already got at least 3 people, and you can't enter a mixture of 3 or more into CODIS.
Wait a minute. How did you know you had 3 people?
When you look at a profile to determine the number of contributors, since you can only get 2 alleles from any one person, you just count the marker with the highest number of alleles, and that'll give you an estimate of how many people you have. So if you have one marker that's got 5, then you have to have a 3rd person to have provided that 5th allele, because the one person could give 2, the other person could give 2, so now you need a 3rd person for that 5th marker or allele.
On the coffee table, that's Exhibit 107. You indicated there was that Mr. Hartung was excluded, but that you had a foreign DNA type.
Yes.
Did you run that through your program to see about that DNA type or put that into CODIS?
It was only 2 alleles, and that's not interpretable.
Okay. When you found Sergeant Bjornson, the crime scene tech's DNA on the kitchen screw,
Yes.
there wasn't blood there from Mr. Bjornson, was there?
No, the swabbing I had taken that had appeared to have Mr. Bjornson on it they failed to give chemical indications for blood.
I'm sorry.
It failed to give chemical indications for blood. It was negative for blood.
So would that have been from his epithelial cells?
It could have been that. He could have spit a little as he was breathing or sneezing or something. It could be sweat dripping off of him.
So it's pretty easy to transfer your DNA is what you're telling me.
Especially in body fluids, yes, it's easy.
Sweat on your hands.
Yes, that would transfer.
Well, and I thought you said breathing. Can you breathe on something and leave your DNA?
Well, if you spit as you, not just air.
Okay, so you'd have to have a liquid come out of your mouth while breathing to leave your DNA.
I would think so, and if not, you'd probably have to be doing a lot of heavy breathing on it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
because you brought up breathing.
Oh, I meant like, if he was breathing and managed to get a little
I was
spittle
trying to
out.
educate myself on that, very
no.
honestly. So if I go, my DNA is not going to be there because I just blew on it,
I
right?
doubt I could pick it up from that.
Okay. Now, you talked about some of Mr. Hartung's DNA being on a belt.
Yes,
Am I correct? And you found that the second time you ran the program, am I right?
the first time he couldn't be included or excluded, and when I ran the program, it included him.
Okay. What kind of DNA was on the belt?
It did test positive, gave chemical indications for the presence of blood, but it could be from touch or skin cells, could be from spit. I don't know.
You're not suggesting it's Mr. Hartung's blood, are you?
Well, it could very well be Richard's blood. His DNA was there as well, and he was obviously bleeding.
So you don't know whose blood, or how the DNA got there?
No, not for certain.
Okay, now, when you're checking something for DNA, can you tell, and two people's DNA are on something, and we'll use the belt. Can you tell whose DNA was on there first?
No, I can sometimes tell who has more DNA, but that would be it.
Can you tell, when you're doing your swab, you're getting whatever is the swab's picking up, right?
Yes.
And what are the swabs? Do you put a liquid on the swabs, or is it a dry Q-tip, or what is it exactly?
Swabs look like a long Q-tip, and I usually add sterile water to them before I swab something, unless, like in the case where I dry swab something because it was going to latents.
Because it was, pardon me?
Because it was going to be transferred to the latent print section,
Okay.
and I couldn't mess up their testing.
Okay, so on this belt, for instance, if there is blood on it, and under the blood might be someone else's DNA, you can pick up both the contributor's blood DNA as well as the DNA under the blood. Is that right?
It's possible.
Okay. In this particular case, how many DNA swabs did you take on the belt?
One.
Okay. And you said you got both Richard's DNA and Donald's DNA?
Yes, assumed Richard was there, and his DNA is clearly the main DNA source there, and then Donald was included as a contributor.
And what does a contributor mean exactly?
With single sources, I can say they match. It matches a person. With a mixture, I can't say that. I have to say they're included as a possible contributor, or that they're excluded, or I don't know, that inconclusive zone.
And in this particular case, what is Mr. Hartung?
He was included as a possible contributor.
Which means we don't know for certain?
That's why I give the statistic to show how likely it is they're included.
Okay. And you couldn't tell if his DNA had been on the belt, how long it had been there?
I can't tell.
A year or an hour?
Yeah, I don't know how long it was there.
Last thing is, There was a cigarette butt that Mr. Myers asked you about that was, there were 5 cigarette butts actually, A through E, correct?
Yes.
And on cigarette butt E, you indicated that that had blood on it.
It gave chemical indications for blood.
Was the blood a result of being next to the bloody rags in the trash can, or do you know?
I don't know. I do know that I didn't see large blood stains on it or anything, so it probably wasn't a huge amount of blood, but I'm not sure how it got there.
Okay, so there was not, was there blood on the cigarette butt, number E?
It gave, the test said yes, it gave chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Do you know whose blood?
Donald Hartung was included as well as Voncile Smith, so it would be one of theirs.
Okay. Was it their blood or their DNA?
I can't distinguish between the two.
So you can't tell if it was Voncile Smith's blood or Donald Hartung's blood?
It was likely one of them had smoked the cigarette because it was a smoked cigarette, so one of them probably came from saliva, the DNA, and then there was blood present according to the test. So
Well,
one
let
of
me
them's
ask
likely
you a
blood.
question. I don't smoke, but I've seen people smoke a cigarette and then somebody will say, give me a puff or whatever, and they'll hand it over to somebody else. And they'll smoke it for a minute and hand it back. Would that create a situation where both people's DNA were on the cigarette butt?
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to have been the DNA from blood.
No, they both could have smoked the cigarette.
Just one moment, please. I think I'm just about finished. I don't have anything further. Thank you very much, Ms. Wilkerson.
I'll redirect after lunch. Back to their lunch to be here shortly, is that correct? Being noon. 1:30 fine with everyone?
Fine, Judge.
Judge,
You want to approach?
yes, please.
Coming in now? Have about an hour lunch break, so we'll be in recess until 1.